Nerds, and today we are doing a Q&A, GM901. It's basically just going to be me. Everybody else is over at Gen Con, and they're having a blast because no one said anything to me about how it was going, so obviously they must be having fun. So overall, I am just chilling at my place. I was about to just be on my couch upstairs, hanging out, and not with just like the regular whatever is on my laptop, and I'm like, I should really come down here and use my green screen, which hasn't been shown a lot of love lately. And speaking of which, I was interested. Oh, hey Shalandor. And everyone else, thank you. Yes, NateCon in the chat. Lincoln. Nice to see you again. Greetings, everyone. I'm glad everybody's here on this fine Saturday. And basically, one of the things about live chats is I am interested. I want to pose the question to you. I know this is a Q&A, but I am queuing you guys and gals. What do you want to see as far as live chats coming up? I'm quiet. I will turn it up. There, hopefully that's not too ridiculous. So one of the things, oh, you know what? I do recordings for when I'm doing my animations, and I found the sound is crisper if I have the gain really low. So I'm going to have to, I know it's live, but I'm going to have to adjust the gain. I hate doing that, but it's better for you to get a little static, I think, than for me to have to shout at the mic, because one of the things I do for, I mean, it's just a $50 mic. So what I end up doing is clapping, then doing the voice acting aspect for the animation, and then I just trim off the clapping, because the clapping lets the mic know I'm not good with tech for some things, and I'm like, oh, this is the only way I know how to do it, because it was recording a little after I started speaking. The mic was picking it up. So what I ended up doing was making a loud noise, and then the mic's like, oh, we should be trying to pick up stuff, is what I found out how it works better that way. Anyway, I'm jibber-jabbering and rambling. So what I wanted to say was I'm interested in doing live chats like we had Sunday, Monday, and Friday, or Thursday, one of those days. We were kind of moving it around. And I wanted to know what you guys and gals were interested in seeing, because we used to do Monster Mash, we used to do world building, and we used to do Nerdarchy After Dark, like whatever we felt like doing. What I want to do is I want to have one of those a week, because we're not streaming to Twitch and YouTube. We were having problems. It was like touch and go. I would lose the feed every once in a while, and it was just really irritating to have that issue of losing the connection, and then it would be like, well, then we would lose viewers because we would have incomplete or stuttery video. So we just decided to go with just doing YouTube, because that worked before and it's working fine now. So Fragonator, I liked it all. Yeah, I liked it all too, but I can't possibly do 6 hours a week of the live chats, which is actually more because it's prep time and getting set up. And I found that it just doesn't work out as far as getting that schedule, as well as the response that we get for it. It's kind of like whenever we do certain types of videos, we don't get enough viewership compared to what we do in a regular thing. So it's basically informing us on what we should and shouldn't be doing on our channel based on what the viewers think of the different content. So that kind of basically feedback is why I'm interested in also asking, see what all of your feedback is as far as what we should move forward with and what we should just not continue. So the 3 things we have, and if it's something different, we've had Monster Mash, we've had world building, and we've also done a kind of like catch-all. We've done everything from the science of magic or whatever, and psionics, or what would a magocracy look like, those kind of things. Hey, Mike Gould, chat request, more GM911s, collaborative world building with maps and such, collaborative adventure building. You know what? I think that would be really cool to do. So, and that's another thing. Do we just want like a catch-all kind of what do we feel like doing tonight kind of thing? That could also be a thing to do. Because I found that sometimes the monster BFFs go great, and other times the world buildings are fantastic. But it's not a consistent like, oh, the world buildings always overperform, or more people catch and are interested in the world building than anything else. So that seems that. Oh yeah, Elf Bait. I like monster building, but would be interested in seeing ground up builds. Ground up builds, do you mean character builds from like first level onward and how that would progress? Or do you mean like starting with nothing and then building a monster or building a campaign? Oh, hey John. Oh, yes, thank you. I wasn't checking, but that's cool everyone's tuning in. I know over here it's been raining for like a week, so I'm just glad I have internet and and electricity for all the crazy storms and stuff that have been happening. All right, so there was somebody. I don't know if they're still here. So I've got a question. Tyler is playing. Player, not a GM, plays a Fiend Warlock that gains hit points when he downs someone. One player will let enemies hit him just to down the one in on with the GM does nothing about it. Okay, so the GM doesn't do anything, and one of the guys is taking advantage of an ability that their character has. Well, I mean, that's like, there's different play styles that will be better for different characters, and sometimes those work really well. So that Warlock's going to be at a disadvantage if they count on getting those hit points from downing enemies. They're going to be at a disadvantage as soon as you say, well, we're capturing and not killing these people because that's part of the quest. Or this person requested that we gather back these amount of people, but without hurting anyone, like we're killing anybody. And that would change the benefit into just a wasted ability at that point, because he's not going to be offing people. And if he does, as part of the RP of whatever the character thinks, maybe that's a big deal to the character, is collecting souls or whatever they view it as, life force or whatever. And that's just something that comes up. I mean, paladins smite things. So if your GM has a whole bunch of undead, well, the paladin's going to be at advantage anytime he smites something compared to everybody else. And that's just a feature of the paladin. So, and come on, warlocks, they don't really, we all know, honestly, warlocks are kind of rough when it comes. I mean, they either do Eldritch Blast, or I don't know what else warlocks do, hold their action for something. I'm messing, but at the same time I'm not, because what are they gonna do? So getting hit points. So what? By the way, they're temporary hit points, if I remember correctly. Temporary hit points don't stack. If they are temporary hit points, they don't stack. They only go up to whatever they are. So if you get 5, I don't remember what the skill is, but if you get 5 temporary hit points every time you kill somebody, you're just gaining 5 back or capping over 5. So it might not even heal you. It's just like a buffer of hit points, that it doesn't go above that. You can't kill 4 people in a row and have 20 temporary hit points. Do you know what I mean? So unless it works differently than I remember, it's not that great of an ability. But as far as warlocks go, it's a neat ability for somebody who's going to go around swinging swords and stuff. I must have read that wrong. Well, I was having trouble reading it, trying to interact and talk while I was trying to check it out. So if it's that way, well, then that's a beat, because I don't know how you kill steal somebody. You don't know if you're going to down an opponent when you hit him. Do you know what I mean? And if you're going to gang up on people to get rid of them. Okay, so everybody else is reading it as the someone's kill stealing, so the warlock doesn't get the temporary hit points. Well, that's a jerk thing. So in that case, it depends. Are they saying out of game, yeah, I'm making it so you can't get this, or they think it's funny when you can't get it? Well, then that you can't use a feature of your character class, and that's annoying. So sorry if I read that incorrectly, but that's what I would say about that. All right, Jeremy Thompson says you could do a series where you help other people develop a toolkit for their adventures, run specific encounters to demonstrate the basic toolkit. I like that idea. That's what I kind of did with. I like the kind of taking you along the journey thing, where you get the basics, start up, what you look at, how you're going to divide it up, and how you're going to conquer the different parts and complete them. And I did that with Psionics on the website a long time ago. It's been like 3 years now at least. And I just did that to say, hey, this is how easy it is to change classes. And I took Sorcerer or Druid as the base based on what I wanted to take. And I just ran with that and made everything like with a psionic bent and changed a few things and altered their spell list. But at the same time, it was just simply the base class, which is considered balanced in the minds of Wizard of the Coast as far as they want to have it be balanced. The classes aren't necessarily balanced against each other in the sense of DPS and damage per second or damage per minute or round or whatever you want to quantify it as a non-MMO term. But they're not balanced in that regard. They're balanced in the sense of what you think a wizard should be able to do, what you think a bard should be able to do, what's the relationship between what a fighter does all the time and what a wizard does all the time. So they're all on their different levels, and they kind of keep it that way. Otherwise, they would have took Wish away. If they really wanted if they wanted to balance the game, Wish wouldn't exist in the game at all. So I would think that would be pretty cool, like making a new archetype on the fly, or if I have an idea for a different class or a different concept with an adventure, and seeing how we can kind of alter a current adventure to our own liking. Like I don't play modules normally, but I said I need to start because none of us in Nerdarchy played modules except our own that we made. So it was kind of easy to say, well, we don't do modules, so who cares about them? But there's so many people who play with modules. So what I did was I started taking different modules and sticking them together in a long story arc. And I started off with the Sunless Citadel, and I incorporated a lot of things that has to deal with dragon cults and stuff. So I stuck a lot of things in there on my own personal concepts for a campaign, and also how I envisioned kobolds and how I envisioned what going forward with the adventure towards other things. And it's been a while since I played that, because that's the game I play when not all my pay-to-play people can play. So we haven't played it in a while because all my guys make it to the game most of the time. And when they don't, we just kind of either set it aside towards another time or whatever. But anyway, what I ended up doing was I played Sunless Citadel, and I altered a whole bunch of stuff, but I kept the maps, I kept a lot of the things the same. I only changed a few attitudes of the NPCs, and I also only changed what was going to happen and where they were going afterwards. And you're welcome, Tyler. And one of the things I did was I included talk of an actual dragon, so that there's another dungeon somewhere in this, and there's considering that they might befall upon a dragon when they go down to where the stuff is. I don't want to talk too much about the Sunless Citadel in case no one's ever played it and they want to, or you want to GM and surprise people. I don't want to ruin this surprise, but basically there's some things in it, and rather than the fruit that is there normally, I turned it into mushrooms. So this thing is growing mushrooms instead of growing apples. Yeah, we're currently just doing YouTube. We're not doing YouTube and Twitch, Tyler. We're having a lot of issues with streaming quality as well as streaming interruption, and that just made it so, even though I'd love to do, especially the 2-hour night ones that we used to do from 9 to 11 Eastern Standard Time, and I want to get back into doing at least one of those, we would have some interruptions at least once a show, and that just really kind of cut the audience and watchability of it. Yeah, I agree, Hale. Modules are a great place to get ideas from. Yeah. Yeah, don't be a jerk. All right, so Mike, your vote is a campaign from scratch or at least town building. I really like town building, and Ted and Dave a lot of the times just kind of say, "Oh, they're going to a town. I'm just going to make it up." And I've done that before, and I've done that for a long time. But in the end, I don't. I don't like doing that anymore. I don't like. I don't like doing that much stuff on the fly anymore. And because I want to focus on what I'm saying, and I want to focus on how I'm saying it, and what's going on in dialogue and description, I don't want to just have to say, "Oh, and it's on this street that I've just got to make a name up for, and it's on okay, and there's this blacksmith, and this is how he acts." And I only make that up 10 seconds before. I used to do that. But it slows down the game because no matter how fast you are at making stuff up, you're going to get caught and stumble every once in a while. And it's those stumbling bits that I end up focusing on. And then that slows down everything else. It's like, when you start, if someone's watching you draw something or write and you spell a word wrong, or you make a line incorrectly and you're like, now I need to erase it, or now they know I can't spell for Jack. And it starts to, at least with me, I started getting an inner dialogue of anxiety about screwing up, and then that just leads to more screwing up. And I know that's a character flaw, but at the same time, you can't just say, well, you're stuck with it and now you're just going to mess up all the time. I say, well, how can I facilitate not raising my anxiety about when I'm playing games? And I found that the best way for me to do that is to plan out certain things so I have a go-to to get back to, and I can start back from that concept and go, okay, this is where I am. So when you stumble, you can kind of say, oh, I'm going down the stairs, so I'm going to step down. So you know the next step, basically, because you've threaded the path with information on where you're going, what you're doing. Jeremy Thompson, the Dresden Files RPG has great stuff on city building. I really like the Dresden Files, and I feel like I've incorporated a bit of their campaign, the concepts from their campaign, into the way I play and what I do. But I haven't played strictly in Dresden Files in a long time, a very long time. I wouldn't be able to tell you, but I love the book series, and I also love the campaign. Straight up Wizard CJ. Shall we buy pre-painted plastic or unpainted minis? Same with terrain such as Dwarven Forge. I do feel like that's a personal preference, or it's out of need. So if you're never going to be able to paint it, okay, let me rephrase that. For all of you who have minis, when you brought them and you said, I'm going to totally sit down and I'm going to take some weekends and paint these suckers, and it's been 3 or 4 or 5 years and you haven't done it yet, you may want to consider that perhaps it's time to just buy pre-painted minis if you care. I know a lot of times it's like, well, there'll be a time in my life, maybe I'll paint my minis, so I buy the ones that are gray because that's just the way I like to do it. Or maybe you want to just start with small painting techniques. So Ted lately has been really into washing things, so he'll take like a dilute solution and go over it, and then he'll stick in the crevices and cracks, give shadow and depth, and it'll make like a carrion crawler that looks like bone white makes it look like, well, it's been crawling around in carrion, and that's kind of that really ups it. So just painting something white and then washing it with something to give it that kind of like I'm in a dungeon grime, I think is just a really simple thing to do. So if you can't get into the high detail, or it takes you, hours to finish one mini, maybe just consider, well, start off small. Just say, I'll paint them all a base coat that I'm cool with them being for a while, wash it, and then add the details later. Maybe one weekend you'll just do a whole bunch of shirts, or a whole bunch of pants, or a whole bunch of the bases. Harris Surmas, greetings from Greece. I'm a big fan. Thank you for showing up, Harris. Nice to see you. And to everybody else. Dlacour, still reviewing, recapping Critical Role episodes, or did they stop doing that? Recently we went and we refurbished the channel, and we're only doing mostly either a live chat like this, or we're doing a three camera shoot where it's got the main with the two people in it, and then it's got the one camera on one person and then one camera on the other, and it kind of edits and cuts in between all of those. So that's kind of our format for right now. We've got some people doing the editing, and recently we've got the D&D Beyond sponsorship, so we've moved up from having like a fixed amount of money coming in every month between our sponsorships and our YouTube revenue and all that stuff and website stuff. So all that together has added up to a certain amount, and during the summer it's nice to have the boost of having another sponsor in, and that kind of allowed us to, between all that other kind of stuff, it allowed us to purchase into a few extra cameras. And next is getting everybody's tech upgraded. Like I said, I have an iRig mic that I've used for two and something years, and it's time for it to be replaced by something a little better. Don't worry, iRig mic, you're still my favorite because you're my only mic. But anyway, that's what I would say as far as that. Chris, how do you do all? Big fan, love you guys. Thank you very much. And Jeremy Thompson, have you seen the TV series? Are you talking about the Dresden Files TV series? I gotta say, I was kind of let down. I watched it because it was Dresden Files, and I was sad because it just wasn't up to my expectation. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a big enough Dresden Files fan that if they said, we're going to release miniseries movies or miniseries TV shows like I don't know. Well, I guess it would be Netflix. It would just be chopped into 4 one-hour shows of each book, and then just their take on each book, and collecting them all together, and kind of I would watch it. But I wouldn't watch a reimagining. I wouldn't watch like 12 books worth of a reimagining of it as it was done currently. I mean, I understand why they made Bob a ghost instead of the skull, but I feel like now, between like face capture and all that other kind of stuff, you could easily do a 3-dimensional skull that talks and winks and moves and does all this kind of stuff, and their eyes glow and flash and all that kind of... You could do that pretty simplistically with the current technology. So they don't really have an excuse to make him a ghost instead. So yeah, Hal, yes, I know it. I know what you mean. I would watch that. I'd be like, yes, thank you very much. I like the reimagining of the books. Oh, Fraginator. Yeah. You know what? I have not read his steampunk stuff. I wasn't into steampunk at the time, and I just said, nah, I'll get to it sometime. And I was off reading other books. And now I'm really reading a lot of classic sci-fi and fantasy stuff. Like before Tolkien, like old stuff. And I just finished off After London. I think that's called Wild England. That's this other title. And it was by like a classic writer, 18-something or other. Something Jeffries, I think. But anyway, like right before he died, like 2 years before he died, they published this After London Wild England book. And it is... sorry, get distracted by chat. It is basically post-apocalyptic before they had the genre post-apocalyptic. Like before that was a phrase that you could look up someplace. He wrote this book, and I've been enjoying really getting into like the birth of sci-fi and the birth of fantasy novels in the current times, where you've got things like A Princess of Mars. I didn't read that series, so now I know what Tharks are beyond just seeing a picture of them. And so I'm getting into all that other kind of stuff, and just really going back into the old book series, because Armageddon 24 something or other, I don't know what it is, but basically it's an old thing, and they had like gravity belts and repulsor beams, and it's just like really interesting to get into like that classic sci-fi fantasy. And I don't know if anybody knows about this, but LibriVox is an online library of old books that have been turned into audio books by volunteers. So, I mean, it's by volunteers, keep that in mind. So people have taken their time aside and read hours and hours of book, and recorded it. And yeah, it's better than having to read it when you don't have time to read. So when I'm doing other things, I'm listening to these audiobooks, and I think it's a great public service, because otherwise I'd have to, some of these books don't have audiobooks to them because they're over 100 and something years old, and no one said, yeah, this is going to sell thousands of copies, so let's do an audiobook of it. So otherwise it's kind of like voluntarily transcribing a book that you know is getting too old and it's going to turn to dust soon and no one's going to read it. It's just like that kind of same thing. You can find them in the library, but you can't find audio stuff of it because of its age and popularity. Yeah, I should just give in and get the audio, buy the audiobook for the steampunk stuff for Jim Butcher. You know what, Mike Gould? I'm interested in Vampire the Masquerade, the 5th. I think it's going to be their version 5. I'm interested in seeing what it does. I didn't like the D10 system too much because of the strangeness with the auto fails and things, but I did like overall the just the amount of background and setting that was put forth from it. I really thought it was like really deep and interesting. I don't have the same problem that Dave does and Ted with not being able to play all the types together, because it's like, well, they're different games. It's like if you had Dungeons and Dragons and you've got Fate, there's certain games that are just more fun to play in Fate. They just are, just because of the way of flow. And I would say, well, let's say you're like fighting an entire army. Well, you're like fighting a war and you've got all these fights to go through. Well, I mean, fighting a war in Dungeons and Dragons combat system could take a really, really long time. I mean, even if you just say, here's this battle, and I mean, you think Warhammer 40k battles take long. If you put 300 people on the field on each side and you're actually going to roll the combat, that is a lot of time. So to me, there's other systems that can do that a little better because they hand wave a lot of stuff. And I feel like Fate, especially Fate Accelerated, could probably go through a war combat pretty quickly, I think, compared to following the way the Dungeons & Dragons system does. Oh, Mike Gold. I like that idea of including different, you call them game hacks, or something that solves in-game issues. So having your character names on clothespins attached to GM screens to display initiative. You know what? We do different tips in our newsletter. I think there's a link to our newsletter. Yeah, there is. Not too far down in the comments. And the link to the newsletter is just, we do a lot of GM tips and player tips in that, while we're also doing the newsletter for the week. And we have a few videos, but it's been a long time since we've done any videos on just like little tiny things like, what does it look like behind my GM screen? And that's something we could show off that, and then just talk about our different strategies for how we play. Because what's kind of like, if I had to equate it to something, I guess it would be the type of strategy someone goes through if they're like a quarterback or something, or some sport, and you're trying to direct things and figure it out. They all have their different strategies on how they get about it or how they get ready for a game. And sometimes those can be funny and weird, but sometimes they can make a lot of sense. So, you know, everyone has their own idiosyncrasies about it, but they also have a lot of wisdom or insight into different preparatory things that could help somebody out if they were to see it and go, oh, well, I can either accept this and say, yeah, this is a great idea, or say, no, that's crazy. So I like that. We could do a behind the screens strategy session. Yeah, Mike Gould, I've played D&D, VTM, Shadowrun, and they all have their merits. I agree. There's different systems that play different scenarios better or worse. But then there is also the classic, I know Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition really well, to the point that I can make stuff in it and I don't feel like it's crap. that I feel like it's pretty decent and balanced within, like I said earlier, balanced within the world that we're talking about. And it's just easier for me if I want to do a heavy role-playing session. I just figure out skill challenges, or I just talk. I like set as a GM, I'm setting the tone for the players on what's going to be going on and what's going to happen. And thankfully, when you got to know when you can do that. If you've got a whole bunch of people who just like to fight stuff and like to go into town just to buy weapons, like basically like adventure in the dungeon style, come back out, exchange stuff, get upgrades, train, go back to some dungeon or some quest. That's a really chill game. And sometimes it's just nice to play that way, but there's plenty of people that think that's a terrible way to play and don't like it, and they want more of the RP stuff. Well, there's not like social hit points in D&D, for example. So, and I've been kicking around that idea, but I'm just like, at the same time, I'd just rather the role-playing aspects be more freeform, because I don't want game mechanics. I don't want game mechanics to kind of run the RP aspects. I'd much rather say that the people can interact, and even if you have an amazing charisma, because then it comes down to like weird things like, well, I rolled a 20 on my charisma, and I had my charisma check to convince this guard of something, and I have XYZ points and things, and you're like, okay, so I should be automatically able to do it. I'm like, well, if you requested something absolutely ridiculous, no, you shouldn't, because unless the person is under the influence of something that's messing up with his mind, or he's sick or got a fever or something, he's going to be kind of have that level of common sense or intellect of a normal person. And they're like, well, no, you can't come in because you want to give the king a fish. That's not a good enough reason for me to let you in the back door. I don't care if you rolled a 20 on your charisma check. So I found that I don't like the idea of applying a combat system game that Dungeons and Dragons have to the RP part of Dungeons and Dragons. I'd much rather just RP stuff. Oh, Fragonator, if it wasn't an RP encounter, every NPC needs to have invulnerability cast on them. I'm going to assume that I got the gist of that sentence, even if there might be a different word. Auto-correcting you. I know the pain of auto-correction when I used to try and type in stuff on my phone to people. I'm like, oh, forget this. Even swipe. You let me down, swipe. So, Fragonator, I would say I don't have just strictly RP or combat encounters anymore, because imagine this: you're a creature, or you're an intelligent NPC. You're playing the NPCs. The NPCs, almost like 99% of them probably don't want to die, and they're trying to figure out a way to get out of this alive. Even no matter how crap the chance looks, they're interested in living still, 99% of the time. So I've had them say all kinds of stuff to the PCs to try and get off the hook for something. And you know what? Sometimes the ones you think aren't going to work are the ones that stick in one of the player characters' minds, or the players, and they go, huh, my player character would totally be okay with letting this person live. Or, yeah, I mean, I've had guys in trees shooting crossbow bolts at people. The players live, and then they capture one of them and be like, you know what? You don't seem like such a bad lad. You were just hired to do this, and you thought you were going to just be stopping people from intruding, like attackers, intruding on your master's lair. So, you were just getting paid to do this, and that's not a great excuse, but at the same time, I don't know, he must have saw something, the dwarf must have saw something in this guy, ends up taking him under his wing, gets him into his mercenary company up north, and the guy is in the mercenary company now. So every once in a while, he sees this NPC that he had the power of life and death over this person. So guess what? That person's loyal to them and very pleased. Yes, Mike Gold quoting Matt Colville, the monsters want to win. Yes, they want to win, and if they cannot win, winning at least is living to them. You know what I mean? Fragging here. Yep, swipe is killing. Yep. Swipe is beast sometimes, especially it can be very embarrassing what Swipe has you say, and then you're like, oh yeah, I've typed a paragraph, it's totally fine, click, and then it's terrible. So yeah, Michael, the monsters want to win, but at the very least, living equals winning to them at the end, because if there's no more living, then they can never win again, pretty much. So that's what I feel like. Even if it's as a DM, you're like, yeah, the monsters are just they're done. I have them either. Sometimes I'll have them throw down their weapons. Sometimes I'll have one of them throw down their weapon, start to run, and then the one that didn't throw down his weapon goes, crap, and has to decide for himself. I knew they were both running, but I break it up. It's not like, oh, they both decide at the same time to turn around and run. No, one of them throws down the weapon, runs, and then the other one might say, well, that's a bad idea. I'm going to plead for my life, or try and give them information. Because now I've got to one-up the guy who just ditched his sword and ran out of combat. So maybe the person's wants to be like the guy who runs faster than his friend from the bear. So instead, he's got to one-up this guy that just ditched combat and left. So they're like, well, if I just ditch combat and leave, they might still kill us both. And I'm the closest guy to them, so I'm going to die. So I've got to figure out a better way to live through this loss. And maybe they want to give him information. Maybe they say, hey, I'll show you a path, or I'll show you a way out of this. Or, don't kill me. I know where the keys are to the dungeon or the treasury or something. And that may or may not be true. And then at that point, they might off the person after they figure out he's lying, or they might say, okay, string us along, and you'll find out later if, as the GM, you'll be like, well, is he telling the truth, or is he actually lying? I'll think about it soon. But for right now, they've got this guy they've got to keep an eye on that might betray them at any time. So there's those kind of things, little tiny hooks and different paths that can take. And as far as the players are concerned and the player characters, that leaves them thinking more that it's open and that they can go in all different types of directions. And I know some of the people I play with view certain deviations from combat as annoying. So, now we've got to deal with this captive. Well, I mean, you can technically just kill them all the time if you don't want to deal with captives, but in real life, there's not a lot of people who want to die. Like even in fights in medieval times, rarely do you just kill the other side. Most of the time you capture people. You knock a noble from his horse, you put a sword to his face and say, I've captured you. Anybody that captures a noble that can keep them alive is saying, you're a giant pile of money as far as I'm concerned. So you fight in a war. If I was a player character, I would be capturing people to ransom them later. Because there's that doesn't really work out that well when you're fighting orc hordes. But if you're fighting another group of humanoids like elves or any type of civilized race rather than monsters, yeah, elf bait, do you yield? Exactly. So there's a whole you're fighting, even as long as you're not fighting like fanatic cultists, there's going to be people who, especially if they're nobles or noble born or they've got money. Heck, could just be a rich merchant that's on the wrong side of this fight with you and goes, yeah, I'd like to live, so I'm going to just figure out how I can get these guys to take my money instead of my life. Because I'm a merchant, I can always rebuild my fortune. Yeah, Fraginator, I would say I give them XP for dealing with the encounter. Even if they run away, I give them XP for the encounter. Because rarely do they run away like right at the beginning. And if they do run away at the beginning, I might have them get chased for a little bit. They might have to deal with like skill challenges and stuff. It's because I'm not married to the idea that they have to fight my monster or they have to fight this encounter and deal with it. Sometimes dealing with it is running away from it and trying to hide from it. It's not very heroic, but you know what? I don't care. I'd rather play a realistic fantasy game. I'd rather play a realistic RP session, role-playing session, and not have many dice rolled than play what I feel like are forced encounters that I have to do a certain thing with. Someone was saying earlier, Fraginator, if I got the if the meaning still holds, giving your NPCs like some kind of invulnerability so they don't die when it's an RP encounter, they're free to kill them. They're gonna have a less I don't know, dynamic game, I think, if they start killing off certain NPCs. But that's up to them, because that's also going to narrow the field of view for where they can go and what they can do. Because if they start killing off NPCs that might give them quests that they might become friends with later, that do all these things that kind of like add up to a more robust area. So, for example, that dwarf that saved that mercenary, he's now in the mercenary company. Well, I'm going to have that mercenary give the dwarf insider information on something that I'm going to reward him for saving that guy's life and keeping him and like turning him in a good direction, like mentoring him in a good direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reward him with information that is only capable to be gotten through this one character. And because he saved that character back in the day, well, that character was a nobody throwaway bandit, but not anymore. He's been saved. He's been transformed into something. So, yeah, Elfbait, I don't do plot armor. If a player does something and they get killed, they get killed. If an NPC does something that the players want to kill them for, if I really need the NPC, I'm kind of like, well, maybe I can kind of make it more fortuitous that is a good idea to let him live, but they can still kill him. Yeah, I figured you were being hyperbolic with the invulnerability, but there are some times where you're just like, why are you being mean to this person? Can't you just ask him the question? Can't you just help this dang merchant with his cart? Why do you have to steal everything from him? Yeah, so there are some times where I've been really frustrated by what the players' characters do and what the players are thinking should be happening. But that's what makes it interesting on my end, because otherwise if you control everything and you know everything, then you're just directing a game, you're not playing a game. Yes, Michael, player choice equals player consequence. And there are some times where I've almost killed somebody and the players have saved them, and that's been really nice because it was a surprise for me, it was a nice surprise because I didn't want the player to die. I didn't want the player's character to die. But I've double critted somebody as a demon, and then I was like, well, the demon would just shove him off of this cliff here, so I hope he lives through this. And it just so happened that I didn't double crit him because I had to roll with disadvantage. Because of something else the other players did the round before. So it turned from me killing a player character to not even hitting him. And that's just like a little bit of what the players' choices are that make those situations able to happen, and also stop either cause great tragedy or preventing great tragedy. I also had an entire, I don't want to go into war stories, but James Leslie, I always have mistreated NPCs come back as a villain of some sort. That's a great point to consider, because there's personal history, and normally these people that are mistreated wouldn't even care and they'd go about their lives. But sometimes that's like, this is the last straw. I'm not going to let people push me around anymore. Or you've done something nasty enough to them, or nasty enough from their perspective, that they want to take revenge on you. Yes, Hal. Players' choices equal character consequences. Yes, that is the correct. But the players still have to deal with their character's consequences. So, I understand the meaning. Oh, Elfbait. Another option is reputation. Mistreat a merchant. Suddenly no merchants in town will deal with the party. That is a great thing to use, I think, for that purpose. There are plenty of games. There are plenty of precedent. There's plenty of precedent for using some kind of reputation points. All right, so I have a GM 911 from David G. They've been GMing off and on since they were a teenager, so about 15 years. And they've been DMing 5th edition for about 6 months. And they're worried a bit about power creep in the game. So I believe David G learned the hard way that +2 magic weapons should be a lot harder to find than they expected. So anybody that's played 5th edition and handed out your first +2 weapon, you would think it wouldn't be such a big deal. I mean, +1 and +2. How bad could it really be just adding that extra plus? But it turns out to be amazingly bad, actually. I've found out that the people that I've given +2 weapons with, I don't know, it's just a dang +1 to damage and attack. But man, I feel like they hit so much more often just because they're at that range where I don't know what it is. It might be my own imagination, but at the same time, once you get above +1, it just seems, even though it's just like 1 and 2 apart, it just seems to be, it just like ramps it over in the other direction. So you're hitting more often. And I have had people plenty of times miss by 1. So when you've got that's the difference between a hit and a miss for a lot of rolls I've seen in my games. So they wants to show his players, it's a highest fantasy setting, but the magic's kind of spread out. So he's interested in showing them Eberron. I'm like, well, probably +2 magic weapon's not going to be that big a deal in Eberron, but at the same time, the reason it's a big deal is the bounded accuracy of 5th edition. So you've got a max of +6 from your proficiency. You've got a max of +5 or 6 for almost every class, even with magic items that augment the stats. You've got a max of +5 or 6 for stats, and then you've got a max of +3 for your actual weapon. So altogether, you're looking at a good +15 to hit, which you're pretty much going to hit everything on a 5+, unless they're like really crazy things. So you're going to hit the majority of the time. And that's something you just got to take into account, I think, when you start handing out that type of weaponry. Yeah, Mike Gould, magic weapons are countered by hordes of minions. Sure, you'll hit, but there are 20 more behind the target. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of using waves of people. First off, so they can't all get killed with a fireball. And second, so you can kind of gauge the encounter and say, all right, well, these 5 goblins came out. Next round, the goblins that are in the other room ran into the other room and then are now running into the room. So they're 2 rounds later, they're gonna come out. So you might waste the first band with some magic or with just I can't think of the word right now. Action surge. I'm like, it starts with an A. It's the fighters thing. I don't play fighters, as you can tell. So you've got the fighters doing action surge. You've got the area effect spells, all this stuff happening. And then another wave comes out. So it doesn't matter that they cut them down with +3 weapons. They're going to have to do it again, and there's like an attrition to that kind of setup. Or you can just have something that it doesn't matter that you hit it. Well, it doesn't matter that you hit in the sense of because it's got so many hit points. I guess I want to say it does matter you hit it, but because it has so many hit points, you're just kind of like chipping away at it rather than slaying it in 1 round as a fighter. So, let's see, the half fiend Tarrasque Lich. Well, yeah, you can always throw one of those at them, Andy. All right, Hail. Adventure League. There's a huge variation of the type of players you won't counter. Remember, it is just a game. Have fun. Don't let them affect you. So, I haven't had any experience in Adventure League. I want to get in a game. I'm going to Gamehole Con. I think it's in November. Don't quote me on that. And when I go, I'm playing in an Adventure League game. At least then. Hopefully I'll get in a little bit earlier to another game some other time, so I can just play at the convention with a more experienced character. And as far as Fella is concerned, any thought on my first time going to Adventure League? I'm going on Monday with a friend of mine. I guess just remember to follow the main rule. You've got the core book and then +1. So before you even make your character, before you start making your character, keep in mind which book you're going to use as your +1. I mean, if you're just going to follow the PHB, it doesn't really matter because you're within the realm of it. But if you want to use, spells from one book and Xanathar's Guide and Prince of the Apocalypse stuff and all that jazz, you're going to stretch out too much into different books, and that would be an issue. But for the most part, if you're not going to multi-class, you shouldn't have much of a problem. And James, thanks for the excellent moderating of the channel. Fella, you're a younger player playing, you're 15 and don't mind that there won't be any players my age but I don't know what they think. A lot of times, basically being a younger player, I would just recommend don't be the annoying younger player. Really, when it comes down to it, if you don't know the rules all the way, if you're a little bit leery about role playing, if you're, if you've got anxiety or worries about how you're going to play the game, don't worry so much about that. Just, I would say I've found that sometimes young players tend to be players that kind of goof off more. So if you stay away from tropey characters that are goof offs, I think that would be a good thing to go in that direction. And, I don't know your maturity level in the sense of, well, I would never, if you're saying I would never play a goof off character, so I don't know what you're talking about. Well, great. Then you probably won't have a problem. But I had I think an 11 or 12-year-old in my game, and I didn't mind it much because another player was there that was related to that person. So they kind of mitigated, monitored kind of them. But they were doing goofy things with Mage Hand. And it's well, I can't spend 15 minutes dealing with this goofery about this Mage Hand. So after a bit, it was just okay, you've had your goof off. So can everyone else play the game rather than the DM having to deal with you screwing around with Mage Hand all the time? So yeah, it's fun, but it's fun when you don't have to hold up the game for everybody else when you're messing around like that. So like I said, I didn't have a problem with the player, but I wasn't going to continue to indulge their screwing around with Mage Hand, tapping people on the shoulder, dropping things on people, that kind of stuff. And I just said, hey, everyone just knows you do that. I mean, everyone just knows that goofy stuff is happening. It's probably the caster that's snickering over in the side there behind the wagon. So they're just kind of you're just the trickster, and they just deal with it. You haven't hurt anybody, so no big deal. So that's my advice as a younger player playing a game like that. Is just don't pick the annoying tropes of or don't pick the annoying cliche characters. Not cliche character. I mean, you want to play an elf archer, go right ahead. But I mean, don't play the pestering elf archer. Ooh, Farscape edition. 3.5, yeah. I think adapting something, John, to from 3.5 to 5 E is really easy. You just adjust the character classes to what they're supposed to be as an archetype. If they made up a whole class, I don't know for Farscape, if they made up a whole class, you could just go and say, well, this should really be an archetype of the fighter, or this should be an archetype of the thief. And then you can kind of just take some of the powers that it gets and incorporate them into an archetype for it. Yeah, Elfbait, that's a great point. It is worth noting that a lot of players want to promote younger players and are willing to help and guide you as well. I agree. I mean, that's probably how they got into the game in the first place. Most of us did not just find the information. Well, I mean, back in the day, not on the internet, but you found the information either in a game store or through somebody, and either that somebody introduced you to the game store, or your friend, in some way, someone has introduced you to the game, most likely, especially if you're a certain age player or older. So you've always kind of had that example, even if it wasn't such a great example, you had that example. And you can, that's the thing, when you can recognize something as a good or bad example, you can choose to do the opposite of the bad examples. So they're still helpful. Well, John, I found about promoting younger players, they are obsessed with visual gaming instead of imagination. You know, if you get into sci-fi or fantasy through Skyrim or some other type of RPG, Final Fantasy, one of the Final Fantasies, or an MMO like World of Warcraft, and then you're like, oh, I'll play D&D because one of my friends does, or I'm interested and I found out about it. Yeah, all they're going to have as information is books they might have read, and the MMO experience, or the single player RPG experience. And it's just getting over the hurdle of, if that's all their preconception of what a game is supposed to be that deals with sci-fi and fantasy. And a lot of times books have main characters. So I found, at least when I was younger, it was hard to think, not like, oh, I'm the main character of the story, rather than I'm one of the players, one of the main characters of a story that involves several other people that are also super important. So that's how you can get kind of like early spot light hogging and stuff like that. But anyway, I would say that if they come from that background, sometimes it's hard to draw them away from the RPG video game mentality. Okay, Dylan the Viking, how do you get combats to go faster? All right, if you want to play 100% by the rules for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, I do the combat faster by getting everyone to roll their initiative. Everybody knows the initiative, so it is kind of like, you don't need to roll in front of me. I just need to know what you do on your turn. So if you really want to run it fast, everybody is doing everything that they want to do on somebody else's turn. If they know they need to do a skill check to climb a wall, and they know they want to climb a wall on their turn, they roll a skill check, and then when it's their turn, they say, hey, I want to climb a wall. I got a 15. Do I make it? Or, oh, I've rolled 3 attacks. They all do, the 3 attacks, they're this. Do I hit? And I've already rolled damage. So there's the damage for the things. Because when it comes down to it, I would rather have 6 encounters done like that in the same amount of time that you would do 2 or 3 encounters where everybody's seeing every roll and everything is going like that. So Scrag, faster combat equals roll initiative. Assassin goes first, combat done. Yes, exactly. That could work very well. Yeah. Also, Shalendor, that's a good advice. Roll attack and damage at the same time. So that's some of the things I feel like makes everything go faster, and people aren't. If you can't get like that 15-second turnaround for somebody's turn, I mean, I don't want people to stumble over stuff, but if you're a spellcaster and nothing's changed most of the initiative, most of the round, and they get to you, and you're like, I don't know what spell I'm going to cast. I'm like, nothing's really changed. There's still a ton of monsters. Why don't you know what spell you're going to cast the first round? Yeah, so 15, 30 seconds. I mean, not clocking it or anything like that, but really, you should be able to. I know it's harder for spellcasters, because you, especially when you've got, I mean, I've got a 19th level cleric now, and there's some times where so much stuff has happened in one round, and they get to my turn and I'm like, well, I've gone through 4 different spells I was going to cast, and I knew what was going to happen, and then so much stuff changed because of powerful attacks, because of other people casting spells, because of other things happening. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, guys. I guess I'll heal somebody. Does anybody need healing? And then they all say, no, I'm at like, I just took like 10 damage. That's it. I'm like, crap. I can't even go to my go-to. So I find that's difficult. And you know what? As far as slow druids go, there is a thing you can do to them that you say you can only turn into stuff you've seen. And then just be very careful with the type of beasts you show them. Then they only have 5 or 6 things. Like when they get to a certain level and they say, oh, I can turn a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's like, have you ever seen one of those? Because that's the only way you turn it into one, buddy. So, you know, it's bad to not let them have anything to turn into. But what I'm saying is, if you just let them turn into any monster manual that you've approved under the sun, there's, I don't know, 150 beasts they can probably turn into. And that's too many. That is, I just talked about how it's difficult to pick out of 30 different spells. So, oh, hey, Mr. L. So, if I'm having trouble because of the changing and what's going on between picking 330 spells, I'm assuming someone's going to have a problem with picking between 150 different types of beasts. I'm just throwing that out of the air as what you could change into. But if we're looking at, I mean, not just Watts products, but if you were like, oh, Toma Beast is okay, and all those other kind of things, there is stuff in there. There is stuff in there that is just going to be too much to think through on what they should do. So yes, Druids, agreed, Mike. Druids need a quick list of viable choices, and you might even make it. I mean, it's a rule that's not in the game. What I'm saying is, if they're taking so long, be like, you can have 3 animals that you can change into per CR. Or, you know, you have 3 flyers, 3 swimmers, and 5 regular beasts you can change into. Say, per druid level, select a monster. You can change it at any time, but it's got to be, like, if you don't have it on your list, you can't change into it. And that at least compacts and condenses what they can change into. And I'm not saying to punish them. I'm saying make it so the game goes better for everybody. Elfbait, you usually use the druid's background and take that into account for the type of critters they can turn into. That's a good point. Most of the time, they're only going to have weak monsters to start, and then everything else is what you give them on what they can transform into. No, it's fella, I believe it's the core books. So it's the three core books and then an additional. Pretty sure that's how it works. If someone could look that up and post it in the chat what the Adventure League's rules are. Again, I'm saying it as a person who is just remembering what I've heard. I have not played an Adventure League's game yet. And there's a lot of things actually in the player's handbook that you can change into anyway that are decent, that are beasts. So keep that in mind, that's not a big detriment to not be able to select things from something else. Mr. L, you started stuff in the chat. Oh, Dylan the Viking. That's an interesting take on it. But I think you can get away with just simply saying if you haven't fought it, if you haven't studied it or encountered it, not like seen it through a binocular from 1,000 feet away, but like seen it interact, seen it move around, maybe have gotten it swiped at you or chased you or you fought it. I'd say that that's a good enough requirement for it. I haven't been watching in time. I'm used to the 2-hour programs. We're already past time. So last questions. I'm by myself, so I don't. It's not like I have to shoot another video, which is what we normally do. Is we run off and shoot more videos. So I can go for a last round of questions, and then I'm gonna head out. A water bear? Hey, you just tell them it's not in the PHB or the Monsters Manual. You can't do it. And a water bear is an alien, not a beast. You can go with that. You know, there's that theory that they actually came from space rather than actually exist on the planet. Or that's the story I just made up right now rather than a theory on where they started from. Oh, that's true. You know, yeah, that would have been a shame to miss the moment where there was a killer whale belly flop that killed the big bad. I would prefer not missing out on some RP gold like that, Andy. So that, and for people who don't know, that is from the game Doug ran for our Friday live games with Puffin Forrest, Megan Miller, Anthony Amato from Cardboard Fortress, Kaneda from Twitch, and also from some of the live chats that we do at night, or that we have done at night. And I'm sorry if I'm missing somebody, but I don't know who I listed already. So anyway, there are Spelljammers, 12 sessions of a Spelljammer game that Doug ran, and that was a lot of fun. And one of the things was Nub Nub, the Bopey Druid, as played by Ben from Puffin Forest, transformed into a killer whale and belly flopped on somebody. It was very cool. Very funny. Yes, in Just Quest. It hasn't been that long, but I'm like, I can't remember what it's called. I know it was Spelljammer. I know Doug wrote it or ran it. But anyway, let's see. Any more last minute questions? So I'm going to head out. And I didn't get to many GM911 questions, but thank you for the chat and interaction. And if you could put in the comments now, or if you're watching this later, in the comments below about what type of live chat you would like to see, Monster Menagerie, not Monster Menagerie, Monster Mashup, some kind of campaign builder, or, you know, let's build X encounter today, those kind of things, or just random Nerdarchy After Dark chit chat. But anyway, I'm going to be incorporating a lot of D&D Beyond stuff into it, where we look up rules through it, and we look up, and we also homebrew stuff in it. And so that's all going to be kind of incorporated into it. So let me know what you think.